Here we go. Good morning, everybody. What a beautiful sunny day. I know that this continued stage 4 lockdown has been extremely stressful for many, including myself, but hopefully things will change soon. And in the meantime, JNF Forever is here to support you, to encourage you all, to ensure we all stay well and positive and inspired. We all know the house rules, so I don't have to repeat them. We all on mute whilst we hear the rabbi. And then at the end, there will be time for questions. So just raise your hand and we will unmute you to hear what your question is. You all know as well by now that I'm Jackie Chait. I'm the legacy manager for JNF Victoria, and that leaving a bequest is an incredibly meaningful and benevolent thing to do. And it's, Israel needs our help as always. So anytime you would love to have a confidential chat with me, that would be amazing. And I'm here and I'm available. As said last week as well, the focus of the JNF Forever events has been to offer an eclectic group of diverse speakers and entertainers. And this week, as we are fast approaching the high holy days under very strained conditions, we felt it would be beneficial to hear the wisdom of an incredible rabbi who can guide us and steer us into making the Chagim meaningful and inspiring. So to our guest speaker, Rabbi Veli Slavin. Rabbi is the grandchild of 4 Holocaust survivors, each of whom he shared a very deep and loving relationship with. He was born in Brooklyn, New York, and bred on the Lubavitcher Rebbe's dream of making Judaism inclusive and meaningful in every place of the world. And from the age of 17, he started traveling for Chabad, energetically undertaking community building, Jewish education and outreach in places like Moscow, Israel, San Francisco, Budapest, New Zealand, and regional Australia. I mean, that is incredible. He received his rabbinical ordination, or smicha, in Pretoria, South Africa, from the rabbinate in Israel. After marrying Chaimki, I think that's, not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, a Melbourne native in 2009, he taught in a special education school in New York for 3 years, and then immigrated to Melbourne in 2011. He is the father of 3 adorable children, and he says he's honored to call Australia home. Rabbi Slavin is part of the rabbinical team in Chabad Malvern. In addition, as the rabbi's childhood home was always open to guests, and his mother ensured that her 4 boys were fully domesticated and purposeful in the kitchen. I'd like to clone that lady. He has taken his culinary skills and love for the kitchen and channeled it towards a charitable cause. Currently, our Giving Kitchen is helping to stock the Jewish care freezers, ensuring that kosher meals can be delivered to those in need in the community, of which there are many. Over the past few years, thousands of volunteers have come through for special charity cook and bake-offs. And if that weren't enough, Rabbi Slavin co-founded Jews in Recovery, the only Melbourne-based Jewish recovery community where recovering addicts from all segments of the Melbourne Jewish community of all genders and ages can come together in total anonymity, meet for support, guidance, spirituality, and friendship. Over to the rabbi. Unmute.
Wow, thank you for that. That's a real, a very kind and a very, very generous introduction. And really thank you for thinking of me, and thank you for inviting me here this morning. And like you mentioned, as we near the Chagim, in a time which will be, unfortunately, less focused on our community get-together, whether that may be through synagogue attendance or family meals, and the focus will be more inwardly, the fact that we'll have to be home, more local. So the topic I've chosen for this morning is a topic, as you'll see a bit later on today, which is a topic close to heart. And our topic this morning is forgiveness. And in the Jewish calendar, the month of Tishrei, which we are about to enter, is really a built-in opportunity for forgiveness. If you think about it, much of our prayers are centered about asking God for forgiveness. We say things like not to remember our wrongdoings, but in exchange, we are challenged or we are presented with an opportunity to act towards others in the same way, which means to forgive. But what I would like to ask this morning is, who is forgiveness for? Is forgiveness the benefit of the one who did the wrong? In other words, is it the benefit to be forgiven? Or is forgiveness for the victim that was wronged? In other words, forgiveness is about the victim to go through that process of forgiveness. You see, many look at forgiveness as this kind of generosity that is given to the one that caused the hurt. But I would like to suggest this morning that really and deeply, forgiveness is the gift that we give to ourselves. More than the other party deserves to be forgiven, we deserve to go through the process of forgiveness. We deserve to forgive. And when we look at forgiveness in that sense, the process of forgiveness is no longer seen as a luxury. It's now seen as a necessary experience that drives away some of the stress and some of the anger and some of the pain that resulted from that specific negative experience. Because our lives very often become all cluttered with all these different resentments. And if our memories constantly archive every single time we were slighted, life just becomes unbearable. We as Jewish people, we more than anybody recognize the power of zachor, the power of memory, the power to remember. But as important as it is to remember, it's also important to be able to forgive. And with forgiveness comes healing, comes self-confidence, and our mental well-being, our spiritual health requires that every once in a while we enter into this journey of forgiveness. And this is a topic I speak about a lot because I feel that for far too long, people have seen forgiveness as a weakness. And I want to argue tonight that it's not. Because forgiveness is not denying that something wrong was done to us. That's not what forgiveness is. If I was to deny something wrong was done to me, then maybe forgiveness is a weakness. But it's not a weakness. It's not denying that something was wrong, something was done wrong. Rather, forgiveness is self-empowerment that allows me to overcome a sense of helplessness that resulted from that specific negative experience. It's letting go of some of the pain and moving on to a better place. You know, it reminds me of something I read, just so simple and so beautiful, from Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, where he writes, "Forgiveness is the only way where we can live with the past without being held prisoner by the past." Such a powerful statement. Forgiveness is the only way we can live with the past without being held prisoner by the past. It's about, my interpretation to that is, it's about stopping to look behind my shoulder and stopping from looking backwards, where I see myself as this object being ruled by forces beyond my control. And I'm beginning to look forward, where I see myself as a subject. I am deciding the path I take from here. I am deciding where I eventually want to be. But if I may, I'd actually like to take this one step further. You see, up until now, I've been trying to say that forgiveness allows us to let go of pain. And forgiveness allows us to move on to a better place. But I think there's even more to that. You know, you don't have to come to a shiur for this. You don't have to hear the rabbis say this. How many of us have been told by family and by friends, you know, let go, man, just let go, forgive, you'll feel better. I'm sure we've all heard that once or twice before, and I'm sure we've all told that to someone else before. Let go, forgive, you'll feel better. But in truth, letting go and forgiving, it's not just about feeling better. You know, if I want to feel better, there's a lot of things I can do to feel better. I can watch a footy game. I can visit a spa. I can go on vacation. I can watch a favorite movie of mine. There's so many options I have to feel better. Spend more time with friends or family or my children. I can name you a million things to feel better. Letting go and forgiving is more than just about feeling better. It's about getting rid of something that is stopping us from living our true lives. Very often what happens is that our grudges and our resentments actually dictate the way we live. And they end up becoming the authors of our stories. And if our resentments and our grudges become the authors of our stories, then they stop us from being true to ourselves and to our purpose in life. It's like there's a saying, I've heard it in America, I've never really heard it here, but it's like the saying that goes, let go or get dragged. I mean, think about it, let go or get dragged. Every single one of us, especially as is taught in the Kabbalistic teachings and the more esoteric and mystical teachings of our tradition, is that every single one of us is endowed with a neshama, a soul. It's literally a spark of God contained within us. And every single one of us with that neshama comes with a mandate. And it comes with a specific mission that is unique to each and every single neshama. Our grudges and our resentments stop us from being true to that mission. I mean, the very fact that I was born, the very fact that you were born, testifies the fact that you are here to lead a specific and unique life. And you know, it reminds me of one of my favorite Hasidic stories of Reb Zusha of Anapoli, who is from the original Hasidic masters, a student of the Maggid of Mezrich. And the story goes that on his deathbed, he was surrounded by his disciples, and he was crying. And his students had never seen him cry before in such a sense of despair. And they turned to him and they said, Reb Zusha, why do you cry? So he said, I fear the world to come. They said, you, Reb Zusha, a man who has dedicated his life to charity, justice, teachings, inspiration, care and well-being for your community, for your Hasidim, for the teachings, for the traditions, a man that lived a life of joy. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of, Reb Zusha? So he said to his students, he said, I'm not afraid that they'll ask me when I come above, why weren't you Moses? I'll say, listen, I wasn't Moses. I didn't have the leadership skills of Moses. I didn't experience divine revelation. He said, I'm not afraid that they're going to say, why weren't you King Solomon? I'll say, I didn't have the wisdom. I just wasn't the smartest man that ever lived like King Solomon. I'm not afraid that they'll ask, why weren't you like the Baal Shem Tov? I'll say, I didn't have the charisma. I didn't have the level of a neshama that the Baal Shem Tov had. So they said to Reb Zusha, so then what are you afraid of? He said, I'm afraid that they're going to ask me, why wasn't I Reb Zusha? And to me, it's such a powerful story because Reb Zusha is teaching us is that we're not here in this world to reach some model of perfection. We're here simply to be who we are. We're here to live our own lives and to be true to ourselves. But a key factor that's stopping us from living our own lives and stopping us from being true to ourselves are our resentments and our grudges. So it's not only about feeling better. That may be step one. It's about reclaiming our lives back. And in this sense, letting go and forgiving is not unloading. Maybe that's the first step. But upon deeper reflection, letting go and forgiving is not just unloading, it's reloading. It's repossessing our unique purpose. So that's my beginning. my introduction, really looking at forgiveness on those two levels. On a basic level, feeling better and not being preoccupied with the past and setting my destination for the future. But more importantly, it's about reloading, reclaiming my life, and not allowing my grudges and my resentments to become the author of my story. But of course, I can imagine the question you may be thinking in your mind, here's the big question. If one is hurt, if one is injured, how can they forgo their feelings to feel differently? We may have been hurt in body, in mind, in heart, in spirit. It's not so simple. What if someone is never really ready or interested in forgiving? I mean, people can come and they can beg sincerely for forgiveness and they can mean it, but some are just not ready to forgo their feelings. So how can we create this expectation when, like we mentioned, it's so hard for us to forgo those feelings, especially when those feelings are so much associated and connected with real pain? So I don't think I have an answer to that question, but I definitely would like to present an approach. And I'd like to present this approach on two levels. One, from a personal story of mine. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've really never shared this story on a public forum like we are on today. I've spoken to it with family and friends, and sometimes in a small shiur with my community in Chabad Malvern or my recovery community, but I've never shared it on a level, on a forum, on a public forum like we're sitting here today. So I'd like to present an approach from a personal level, but I'd also then like to present the process of forgiveness in a new way, maybe to create a bit of a paradigm shift, to make that journey to forgiveness a bit more approachable and a bit easier and definitely more inspiring to engage in. But before the story, just a disclaimer. From a perspective of Jewish ethics, when we are asked for forgiveness, we are encouraged to forgive. There is no denying that. Literally, in the code of Jewish law, you can see it, where we are encouraged if a person sincerely approaches us for forgiveness and they go through what they need to go through as Jewish law mandates, whether it's making restitution financially or verbally, we are encouraged to forgive. Still, we need to be very clear that there are a number of exceptions in Jewish law where forgiveness is not expected. In effect, forgiveness can even be discouraged. It's not for now. It's an entire topic for its own. But some of those examples can be, there are a number of examples, about 5, 6 that I can think of off mine, but one example may mean if someone has slandered you, someone has created a libel about you, which is a negative and untrue story. Jewish law would say you are not required to forgive because this person may come and forgive you, but that story now has a life of its own. So they may come and forgive you, but the rest of the world that knows that story doesn't know that it's not true. So your forgiveness doesn't really complete the picture. Another example can possibly be, well, if the person is coming and they're not sincere about their forgiveness, or if your forgiveness may put you in a place of harm. So that may be forgiving an abusive spouse, which will then put you in a place of harm again. Judaism would discourage you from engaging in that process of forgiveness. So that's a disclaimer that although we are encouraged to forgive, there are definitely exceptions to that where not only are you not encouraged, you may even be discouraged. And therefore, it's important to understand that in some situations, we are absolutely not responsible for something that may have happened to us. And in that case, forgiveness begins with forgiving ourselves. We can't blame ourselves for the actions of others. We are not responsible for the choices other people have made, whether it's a close friend, a colleague, a partner, a family member, or even a complete stranger. In some cases, forgiving ourselves is the greatest gift of all. So with that disclaimer, back to our question. There are situations where maybe emotionally we're just not ready to forgive. So I'd like to approach it, like I said, with a personal story, and then maybe a little bit of a paradigm shift on how we engage the process of forgiveness. It was September 2007, and I had just returned home from a year abroad in Budapest. As was mentioned in the introduction, I was very lucky that when I was 20 years old, my yeshiva sent me with 4 of my friends to Budapest for a year on what is called shlichut. And it was a real inspirational coming of age kind of year. It was a year of travel. It was a year of insight. But the year had passed, and now I was home. I was back in my hometown, which is Brooklyn, New York, and specific in Crown Heights. And on my first Friday night back home, after being away for a year, I met up with a friend who I hadn't seen for a year, and we went for a walk. As we went for a walk, we passed a group of probably 7 to 8 African-American teenagers, and I didn't think anything of it. You know, the past year I had come face to face with neo-Nazis on the streets of Eastern Europe, dressed as Hasidic teenagers. We were, you know, quite visible. We had a few run-ins. In the past year, I had spent countless of hours visiting Holocaust survivors. Part of our travels was visiting concentration camps and museums. And it was a year where we really dedicated. In 2007, we were still dedicating ourselves to a year of rebuilding a community that so many years later was still coming out of the ashes of destruction. And I was home, and I was slowly releasing my grip from the horrors of the past, and didn't want to think anything of the dangers of the present. You know, I didn't want to. But I started feeling a bit uneasy as I was going for this walk. I felt a bit nervous. I felt I was being followed. And when it was a bit too close for comfort, I readied myself to turn around, and pop. I just felt this most unusual sensation to the right side of my face, and my ears were ringing, and I was confused. And I put my hand to the right side, and I realized that, you know, it was Shabbos. I was wearing a white shirt. It's September in New York. It's nice outside. And I realized that my white shirt was now red. I was bleeding from my face, which was, you know, going to my shirt. And I was no longer able to see with my right eye. And then I felt about 4 hands, you know, wrestling me down to the ground. And when I was on my back, I began kicking and screaming, and, you know, words were exchanged, and I know I was shouting. I can't remember exactly what I was shouting, but my attackers fled, and one of them holding a bloodied metal baseball bat. I was able to get to my feet, and I stopped a passing New York taxi, and I was able to call for help. And only once I was lying in the Hatzalah ambulance and the adrenaline began to subside, a terrible sense of pain began to set in. I had been struck just once on the right side of my face with a baseball bat. I instantly suffered 5 fractures to my face, including a fractured the orbital bone. My face was swollen like a basketball, and it felt like it was going to explode. But I was rushed to the hospital and emergency surgery, and I needed reconstructive surgery. A quarter of my face is titanium, and I get this question all the time. No, it doesn't beep when I pass through metal detectors. But I was then home from the hospital. The police started an investigation. It was seen as a hate crime. Nobody was caught. nobody was punished because I had never actually seen the faces of my attackers. And I was about 21 years old, and I really wanted to move on in life, but I was upset. I was dejected. I was angry. I was very angry. At that point of time, I had plans to travel abroad for my rabbinical study in South Africa, but my energy was depleted. My heart was no longer into it. I didn't want to go. I felt like I was sinking. And on the outside, to everyone, I was recovering. I was fine, but deep inside, I was really suffering. And one night, it was late at night, I was lying in bed, and all these different negative emotions are just swimming through me. And this photo in my room caught my eye. And it was a photo of my grandfather and I by my bar mitzvah. And my grandfather has his arm over my shoulder, and his normally deep, moist eyes in this photo are radiant, and he looks, immensely proud. And as I held that photo, I was transported back to the many nights that I spent with my grandfather at his hospital bed. And I began remembering some of those stories that he shared with me. My grandfather, Reb Chaim Tzvi Moskowitz of blessed memory, despite his Holocaust trauma, was a man that personified faith, prayer, goodness and kindness, charity, community, study, and really acceptance of all. And his story of destruction and renewal began to flash before me. And as I put that picture back on the shelf, I felt this possibility to be able to transcend my current state. It was like I told myself, I think I can work through this pain. That my grandfather's lesson on resilience taught me to see my trauma as an opportunity to reach a higher place. Because one of my greatest fears was that as I was struggling inside with that recovery, is I was becoming a racist. And I was hating everybody because the crime of a few. And the fear of living a life of hate, the fear of living a life of that kind of way, it was such a dreadful worry. Like I was imagining myself living the rest of my life with these kind of feelings and emotions and attitudes, and I knew that would just be unbearable. So that night, that very unique night, the seeds of forgiveness were planted, and ultimately, I unilaterally forgave my attackers. Now, resentments still linger. I'm not going to tell you it's like the story of like healing and perfect and it's all fantastic. I still feel resentments because, as I said earlier this morning, that my forgiveness doesn't mean that I've forgotten. Some of my facial pain will never allow me to forget. But my forgiveness has ensured that I am no longer a prisoner of that fateful night. That my attackers don't dictate the way I live my life. They are not the authors of my story. They may be the co-actors in one of the chapters. And in a certain sense, I'm very happy that that chapter was added because of the growth it has given. So they're not the authors of my story. They may have co-authored a chapter, co-acted a chapter, but they're definitely not the author. The reason why I share this story is that I mentioned that the seeds of forgiveness were planted. And this is going to lead me to my final point this morning. To re-examine forgiveness. To maybe create a deeper understanding of forgiveness. And what I'll conclude with tonight, or this morning, is a teaching of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, where he encourages us to look at forgiveness in a different kind of way. But what I'm going to do before I do that is I'm going to put up on the chat a question, and you can respond in the chat just by putting in what you think your answer is. So you'll see as the chat comes up, just pay attention to the chat. And I'd love to see some, you can just answer with a letter or two. You'll see what I mean. as it approaches. There we go. It's up on the chat. So you can stay muted. You don't have to give your answer. You can just, put it in a letter. It may take a minute or two for you to read my question. So I see a C has come up. Another C. Two Fs as well. Keep them coming. I love the responses coming through. There's also an option for other. If you feel these definitions, don't speak to you, you can just pop that in. I'm not going to tally up all the responses. My purpose really is just to, give everyone a breather and just to think things a bit differently. Yes, Danny, you could have two choices. Yes, someone's saying, forgive but can't always forget. But like we mentioned today, forgiveness doesn't mean that we forget. So here's my concluding point. And like I said, this is a teaching of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, where he encourages us to look at forgiveness. That forgiveness
it's not easy to forgive.
Has multiple levels. For example, let's talk about forgiveness on multiple levels. For example, it's a very normal feeling that if someone has wronged us, for us to harbor feelings that the person that has harmed us should suffer or should be punished for what they've done. So if forgiveness has multiple levels, maybe level one, maybe step number one is to work on myself to no longer harbor that desire. Something simple as that, where I'm working on myself. My self-work is that I no longer harbor the desire for my offender to suffer, for my offender to be punished. I may still harbor animosity, but the animosity has been mitigated to the extent that the victim is no longer desiring that harm befall the offender. That could be step one. Once I've worked through that, I can move on to step two, that one forgives to the degree that not only don't you want harm to befall the offender, but you no longer have animosity towards the offender. Maybe even you wish the offender well. You wish them good in their life. No relationship has been restored over here, but it's getting rid of a bit more of the baggage. And then these steps can continue where ultimately, if it's a situation where you are in a relationship with a person before, the relationship can be restored in some kind of level. But where I'm going with this is that ultimately, Ultimately, forgiveness is about restoring a relationship. But at the very same time, forgiveness is a spectrum. Forgiveness is a process. And when we stop looking at forgiveness as being black and white, and when we start looking at forgiveness as being multi-dimensional, it allows us to be more ready to forgive. See forgiveness on multiple levels. I can begin the process of forgiveness on the most basic of perspective. I care enough about the offender that I wish them no harm. Simple as that. It's a conscious decision to transform very negative feelings, negative enough that you wish someone else harm, to more positive feelings, or at least to more neutral feelings. Again, seeing forgiveness as multiple levels. Also, I mentioned, see forgiveness as a spectrum. Forgiveness is not a one-size-fits-all approach. It depends on the victim. It depends on the offender. It depends on the person. It depends on the nature of the offense. Forgiveness is a spectrum. But also, I mentioned before, forgiveness is a it can mean, the journey to forgiveness can mean that today you forgive on the most basic level, and tomorrow you proceed further. A wound heals slowly. Take it gradually. But each achievement within forgiveness opens new vistas, opens new possibilities. Ultimately, forgiveness is possible. Forgiveness doesn't require that you become best friends overnight. It doesn't mean that you're not going to harbor that resentment or a little bit of that pain. But remember, if the first level is achievable, simply not wishing harm, and then moving on to the next levels, who knows where it can go from here? And I believe if we take the time to think of forgiveness no longer as black and white, but as a process, but as a journey, within a spectrum, but most important, something that's possible, I think that encourages us and that inspires us to engage in this journey of forgiveness a lot easier. Like I mentioned earlier today, this year is going to be a bit different for many of us, where so much of our associations are about the crowd, the community. And unfortunately, this year, it's going to be a lot about self. But as Jewish people, we're always challenged to look at opportunity within the negative. And I think our opportunity this year is to really focus on some of that self-work. What are those things that are hurting me that I'd like to leave go of? What are those things that are the authors of my story that I just feel that that's wrong? Hashem's my author. My neshama is the main character. So who are those that are just co-actors? And what are the things that I'd like to forgive? And already just starting on the smallest of levels has already put us into that journey of forgiveness. We've already given ourselves that gift, and who knows where it's going to take us. So thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for listening. And it's my hope and my prayer that all of us have a Shana Tova, a happy new year. And again, thank you so much for inviting me, for thinking of me. And it was my absolute pleasure of being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. That was absolutely sublime. If anyone would like to ask a question, please just put up your hand and we will unmute you. Let me just scroll across. Or if there is anyone that can unmute themselves, but just... Yes, Bella. Bella?
Can I say something, Bella? Can I say something?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Rabbi, it's not easy to forgive. When you are Holocaust survivors, I can't forgive. There are things I remember and I can't forgive and I don't want to forgive. It hurts, still hurts. It's an open wound. So I understand how important it is to forgive, but I can't, and I want.
I hear that, Bella, and I appreciate you telling us that. As someone wrote in the chat, sometimes we have to accept some acts are not forgivable. And that's true. What I mentioned earlier in today's class, when we started in the morning, when I gave just a bit of a disclaimer, is that within Jewish law and within Jewish ethics, there are examples of times where not only are we not expected to forgive, but we're encouraged not to because of the further pain and hurt it may lead to. And sometimes all we can really do is forgive ourselves. And we can't take responsibility for the actions of others. So Bella, I agree with you. And when the wound is still open so many years later, and the pain is so real, no one in the world has the right to challenge you or to expect anything else of what you yourself believe you need to do, especially from such pain.
Thank you, Reb.
No problem.
Anybody else? How's it?
Bernie is unmuted.
Bernie?
It's Julie on Bernie's code. I came in late, and all I can say is I was blown away by Valley's story, and I've known him for a long, long time, and I've never, ever noticed that he was harboring such trauma. And I think what it is that we can put it in the back burner and get on with whatever we are living with. And that way, we will never get rid of the pain that is there, but we will miss out on a lot of the joy if we bring it forth at each of our meetings. I don't know whether I said that clearly, but congratulations, Valley, you're very special. And to the lady who went through the Holocaust, we can't say anything to you except what a brave person you are, that you can live a normal life after what you have gone through. And that is a form of not forgiveness, but mental calm and health for you to survive. Congratulations.
Julie, I second that about Bella. I'm honored to have had you in attendance this morning.
Amazing. Anybody else, Halsey? You can unmute yourself.
Valley, you're there.
I'm
Can you
here.
hear me? Oh, Valley, first of all, I want to say, together with others, it's so nice to hear one of my rabbis speak on such an important topic. So I'm proud to be part of Chabad Malvern. I want to ask you a question. I think when you face challenges that are serious, and maybe certain people who you've had long relationships with, or not necessarily long, can sometimes upset you on issues that are very hurtful. And I must say to you, I really listened, and your stories were very moving, what happened to you so long ago. But I think sometimes it's very hard to forgive when people have been, in my opinion, cruel. And a leading rabbi in Israel, who I'm close to, gave me some advice once, and I just wanted your opinion. They said, if you're really hurt and you feel deep down you can't forgive, then take the white out and then wipe them out so you won't suffer anymore. So I just wanted to know what you thought of that story, what I was given.
It's an interesting perspective, and I can't say I disagree. I'm actually of the opinion that sometimes there are just some personalities, even if in the beginning those personalities were able to jive and they were able to work together, but sometimes they reach certain points. And I do believe sometimes we have to recognize that, these two personalities at the moment are not meant to be, and to create borders and to create limits and to create guidelines and to create a form of respect where there is a little bit of difference to be able to protect ourselves. So I do believe in that. With saying that, as I've tried to argue this morning, that you can still engage through the process of forgiveness with that. You can still start working on our inner work. In other words, even though ultimately 100% forgiveness, the ideal forgiveness would be a restoration of a relationship, but that, even if I know I could never get there, it doesn't mean that I cannot engage in the original steps, which would be like not harboring negative feelings towards that person, maybe even wishing that person well. It's about working on those feelings of imagine carrying with us constantly this feeling of wishing someone else, wrong and that type of. So I can't say I disagree. I don't know if I'd use the word, white outing or whitewashing and things like that. Those are, big words and also negative, but I would use the word boundaries, creating boundaries. And you can still go through the process of forgiveness while creating a boundary.
Thank you. Thanks, Billy.
I think we can have one more question. Anybody else? No one? Yes? No? It just says new house.
Yeah. I think you just have to unmute yourself.
My original question to you, Valley, was answered when you spoke to Bella, because if I was facing Eichmann, I would find that I could not possibly ever forgive him. The other concept is if I say to my partner, I forgive you, I forgive, she would be very happy. But if I added the word, I forgive you, I finished up with a black eye. So I've got to be very careful with forgiveness.
It's a little bit of a lot of information there, Harry.
Someone's bell's ringing. Okay, so I would now like to hand over to our chair, Bella Ehrlich, to do the vote of thanks. Bella, you can unmute yourself. There we go.
Yep, I'm right. Yep. Rabbi, that was one of the most meaningful talks I've ever heard. Forgiveness has so many angles, I suppose. First of all, to forgive ourselves, and then to forgive others, and all the various levels of forgiveness. It goes so deep and so far. But your story was just so touching, so meaningful, to be able to forgive those people who hurt you so badly. I know you'll never forget, and most of us never do forget, but I think in this time of lockdown, we've got plenty of time to reflect. And rather than reflecting on the negatives, I think we should all be looking towards those positives, let go of the past so that we can enjoy the future, and this lockdown will end, and your words will always resound with us. So thank you very much for such a meaningful talk.
My pleasure. Like I said, I just want to, if Sarah is still here, I just want to publicly thank Sarah for thinking of me, and just feel, I guess, honored and humbled that I was, out of many rabbis in this state who are, home and twiddling our fingers, I was chosen. So
And
thank
very,
you so much.
very, very, very worthy. So on that note, I would just like to once again, thank you so much, Rabbi. And just to let everybody know, we will be having a break next week because everyone will be preparing for their Rosh Hashanah dinners for 2. So that will be a lot of work. But we will have a break next Thursday, and we will be back the week after with another amazing stellar speaker. We have somebody joining us live from Israel, an incredible world famous wildlife photographer. I cannot wait personally, and that's going to be absolutely wonderful. And I would like to take this opportunity to personally wish you all a happy, healthy new year, an easy and meaningful fast on Yom Kippur, and may we all be inscribed in the book of life for another incredible year to come.
Amen.
Thank you all for being part of this beautiful group and that we meet every week. I know it does my heart good. I hope we're doing your hearts good. And thanks once again, Rabbi. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the sunny day and see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye.